Good afternoon, everyone. This is Ganesh Subramanian, founder and CEO of Stylumia. I hope all of you are keeping well and staying safe. I welcome you all to this afternoon CEO talk. We've been having a series of talks over the last few weeks, wherein the CEOs come and talk about their expert views on how any fashion and lifestyle brand or retailer can navigate the COVID challenge and come out resilient and future ready. These are the times to share and collaborate amongst ourselves. Today, we have a special guest, Manish Kapoor, CEO of Pepe Jeans India. Manish has 17 years of experience in the world of fashion retail. He started with Pantaloon Retail, then Madura Garments, a long stint with Benetton India. In that period, he handled operations across Southeast Asia, Australia, then moved on to French Connection as a COO. For those NIFTians, Manish is a NIFT gold medalist and All India topper in PGDAM. His business mantra is people and passion. With that brief, we will have Manish talk first and then have the Q&A. I would like the audience to ask questions through the link sent already. And in case you would like to ask live, please use the chat option. With that brief introduction, please join me in welcoming Manish Kapoor. Over to you, Manish.
Thanks, Ganesh, and good afternoon to all. So, thank you for giving this opportunity for sharing my thoughts on the whole situation today. So, if I look at it, we are in an unprecedented situation, as in it's completely unpredictable. When we look at fashion businesses, especially in India, we're looking at a scenario wherein you have zero cash inflows. Again, you don't have any precedent in terms of on modeling or in terms of expert views through which you could forecast scenarios and say, this is how we'll move or this is how the business is going to move. So we are in a very, very fluid situation. And I think these are the times wherein it's the true test of leadership and also of organization in terms of their resilience, in terms of how do we cope through this pandemic. So I'll probably focus my chat across three areas. First, I'll talk about in terms of what it takes from a leadership perspective in terms of going through this challenge and then overcoming it and then moving into the post-COVID scenario. Second would be from an organization perspective. And on the third aspect, I'll cover in terms of what changes would happen, what I foresee is going to happen from a consumer channel and an overall market perspective in terms of how those, in terms of ecosystems would change. So if I look at first in terms of when I look at a leader, I think the most important thing for anybody who's leading an organization today, and I say across industries in this scenario, is not to panic and be calm. Because I think that's the most important thing. You can easily get carried away and start throwing tantrums or getting nervous and then making your teams nervous. Most important is be calm, be cool, and don't panic. Second thing I think is very, very important is that, again, it's a lesson on leadership that people should have learned before, but it's all the more important right now, is in terms of be able to run work through ambiguity. These are the times wherein nothing is certain. You can't plan for anything. Things will go the way they will go. You don't know when things will open. When the lockdown is going to be off, how the consumer is going to behave. So you need to learn to work through ambiguity and keep taking the challenges, keep taking actions, keep taking decisions as you move through. The third important thing from a leader perspective, I think, is it's important that you need to lead from the front. So whatever you do, you need to practice what you preach. So whether in these scenarios, you are looking at asking the team to think differently, looking at probably sort of scenarios that we are in with limited cash flows, taking a pay cut, or any of those things. You need to lead from the front and say that, okay, this is what I think is right. I'm doing this. What else? And why I want you as team to follow, or the organization to follow, or the partners to follow. So I think that becomes very, very important. Another important aspect would be in terms of communication. So a leader has to communicate his thoughts, his vision, his in terms of expertise or what he feels about situations. But these are scenarios wherein that communication becomes all the more important. You need to keep communicating with the team, keep their morale high, yeah, keep talking to them in terms of the situation. Basically, try and work into working an environment which is very, very transparent and taking people together. I think other two important aspects that a leader needs to look at is basically in terms of saying that you need to reimagine the business. When we are running businesses, and especially bigger businesses, sometimes we are afraid in terms of taking calls wherein you have a X amount of revenue coming in from a particular channel, and probably this is not the right channel in terms of it's not going to grow the same way that some others might grow, but you like, as in you're okay, or you can't disturb it because you have a huge chunk of your revenue coming in from that particular channel. Similarly, you look at costs, you look at other processes, but this is the time wherein you need to actually reimagine your business, reimagine the way you are looking as in doing things, because this is once in a lifetime opportunity for me wherein you can make changes that you would have thought that you will do in 3 years. Probably you can do it in 3 months. Biggest thing is that as in you're getting rid of a lot of as in bondages that you have had. You will be looking at a scenario for almost 2.5, 3 months wherein you'll not have revenues. So a lot of you will also get a lot of time in terms of actually thinking about things. Otherwise, you are all the time, you and the teams are busy in terms of doing day-to-day work. You've not been able to think about those things. This is the time to reimagine business. And related to that is as in terms of asking the teams also in terms of saying that be innovative. You have to breed innovation. You have to challenge the status quo. So I think those are the 4 or 5 important points that I look at it from a leadership perspective. When I talk about an organization, I think the first thing that an organization has to look about today is in terms of conserving cash. So probably you need to look at your objectives in terms of saying next 4 months and then 4 months and beyond. 4 months should be just about sustenance, survival, and then as in you look at growth and profitability thereon. Second and most important thing that our organization needs to do today, and I think is to focus on digital. So when I say digital, I think it's not only about saying marketing or in terms of e-commerce, in terms of how you sell. I'm saying that when you look at digital, it is about the way you work, the way you communicate, the way you reach out to the consumer, the way you sell. And I think as in probably 6 months down the line or a year down the line, when a lot of people will be asked as in what held you or what pushed you to moving into digital. As in 6 months back, people were asked, they had different reasons. I think 6 months down the line, if CEOs are asked or organizations are asked that question, I think 90% of them are going to say that COVID was one of the important reasons that pushed them into moving into digital. So I think digital is going to play a very, very important role, and it's very important for organizations to start thinking that way, because I think that's the only way, as in terms of survival, or as in terms of growing profitably post-COVID. Third thing, as in that organization should look at in this scenario, is that a lot of people talk about cutting cost, and cutting as in they classify cost as good cost and bad cost, and saying cut bad cost. I'm saying look at a revenue and say what is good revenue and bad revenue, and cut out the bad revenue. So you have typical scenarios wherein you've got long lead time consumers, you've got people who are as in selling but not paying you, or you've got business models wherein the inherent profitability is very, very low, but you are, because of as in your top line pressures or otherwise, you are just continuing with that. I would say as in look at that, study it, and cut out the bad revenue, because this is a time that you are getting wherein you will be able to actually improve your business efficiencies when you are able to cut down on these things. So it's not only about bad cost, it's also about bad revenue. In terms of, when I look at it as in terms of another important thing that people need to look at, and especially on the fashion side of business, is the whole demand planning cycle, the whole supply chain cycle. So I think that's going to as in need a very, very big overhaul. We need to be very, very clear in terms of saying that we'll not be able to work through these 9-12-month cycles. We need to break it up. We need to, again, as in you have this cycle wherein you're booking with as in with your retailers, with your partners 6 months in advance, once a season. I'm saying that once you adopt digital, probably you can break that cycle into a 2-month cycle or a 3-month cycle. You need to get closer to actual action in terms of demand forecasting. You need to mend your supply chains accordingly, which might also mean that you need to place orders closer to the consumption place. So it's going to actually take a lot of work in terms of actually doing away with this whole traditional system of saying that this is my cycle in terms of it starts on day 1 and ends on day 120 or 150. You have to say that my day 1 is when I'm selling to the consumer, and then work and say that I can only work as in afford 60 or 90 days in terms of predictability, and then how do I squeeze in other things? So that's going to play a very, very important role. That's something that when I speak to a lot of my friends and globally in terms of our organization, we are working on. But I think that's going to be the biggest game changer for people, as in for our industry post-COVID. Now, when I look at as in terms of the 3 aspects in terms of consumer and markets and partners in terms of how COVID is going to change that. So I think most importantly from a consumer aspect, I don't see that as in people are going to go back to being normal very, very soon. So we are going to look at a new normal sort of a situation post-COVID. For sure, themes like e-commerce, digital commerce, things like hyperlocal are going to become very, very important. Even within a store, themes like contactless service are going to become important. So I think the most important thing for a consumer today, and it comes out very clearly, especially for India, when we look at various surveys, is that people are very, very worried about their health and safety. So safety is going to become the key theme, and everything. So you'll have to redefine everything that you do, as in with a consumer around that theme. So whether it is as in talking about how do you reach out to that consumer, how do you service them. So again, the service standards in terms of stores, how our service associates interact with the consumer, how do they as in service them, how do you process your payments, all those things are going to look at as in terms of a different light. You would probably look at a solution wherein effectively the whole journey more or less even as in becomes contactless, only to the extent in terms of the consumer probably touching the garment for trying, or as in you handing over a carry bag to him, but otherwise as in becomes completely contactless, right from the as in terms of the interaction to the payment gateway. In terms of as in another important thing in terms of the consumer psyche that I feel is going to change is that consumer is going to become much more sensitive to origin of product. We are seeing a huge backlash in terms of certain production sources, wherein people are saying that why this needs to be produced there. So I think in terms of themes like produced in the country or where it is getting consumed, that's going to become important. Again, sustainability probably is going to become again very, very important, wherein people will say that if as in this is sustainable, if this is going to help the environment, if this is going to help the community, I'm ready to pay a price, or even as in if it is similar price equation, I'm going to prefer a product which is more eco-friendly. So sustainability and as in country of origin are going to play a very, very important role from a consumer's mind. Another important role as in, and we have these quite a lot of studies wherein people say that probably consumers are going to become less loyal to brands. To me, as in this is a time wherein brands have an opportunity wherein consumers can actually become more loyal to you. So if they have that trust in you and you are able to fulfill that trust and make that bond stronger, probably that stickiness as in is going to grow further. So this is probably an opportunity again, wherein brands, if you are able to communicate to the consumer as to what you are doing, which is right to make them safe, which is right in terms of your sourcing, which is right in terms of sustainability, I think that bond, that loyalty is going to increase and not decrease. Again, in terms of there are a lot of talk and chatter in terms of saying that people are going to downtrend, people are not going to shop. But I think as in, if we look at certain segments, so if probably it's going to be different for staples and daily needs. But when I look at things like fashion, probably as in fast fashion or as in things which are very, very fads are going to take a back seat. But again, people will pay to look at things which are different, because it's not about as in saying that my t-shirt is nonce, and especially when I look at masstige brands or luxury brands or bridge to luxury brands. So it's not about fulfilling a need. It's not about saying that I don't have a t-shirt or a denim, so I want to buy a denim. So every time I would, as in consumer would walk into a Pepe store to buy a denim, he would look at something different that he doesn't have, and he's not going to look at basics or complete staples. He would look at something which is differentiated. Yes, as in previously he was paying $3,000 or $4,000 for it. Probably you'll say that I'll be happy if it is 3,600. But I don't think that people are going to move away from brands just because they want to downtrend.
Great, Manish. Go ahead. There anything to add to that?
So I think, as in, if I look at, as in from a workforce perspective, from people's perspective, uh, brand, brands, organizations would need to, as in, actually relook at their whole uh, resource pool and say that, as in, what really works for me. And I'm not talking about downsizing or right sizing. It is about giving people opportunity. So I think people who are more adaptable, people who can do multitasking, people who can come up with out of the box ideas, I think those are the people which are going to grow faster. Those are the people who will get bigger opportunities within organizations. And I think in terms of organizations would also see a change in terms of the way they work. So we were doing a study for our office, and we realized that given the workforce that we have and the area that we have with the social distancing norm, probably 20% of the people would need to work from home at all times. So I think those are also changes that are going to happen. So you will have scenarios wherein, and we have seen that as in work from home actually works pretty well for a lot of people. So people will realize that effectively you don't need as in such big offices. You can do with smaller offices or within the existing workspace. If you need to maintain those 6-8 feet social distancing norms, you can do with almost 20, 25, 50% of the workforce effectively working from home. So I think there again, as in, it's going to be a bigger change in terms of the whole work environment. uh, Zoom and digital things as in are going to play a very, very important role. It's not about getting physical to know each other. It's not about coming together to generate a new idea. You could do it sitting in remote locations. So I think the whole, probably as in the whole world in terms of how we look at it, it's going to change. Uh, I think in terms of India, probably the change is going to be much more uh, pronounced because we are adaptable comparatively more as compared to some of the other ethnicities. But at the same time, what I also feel is that this is a golden opportunity for India. Probably we'll have a gap of 12 months, but 12, 15 months down the line, our growth rates uh, as a nation are going to be much faster than what we would have envisioned probably 3 months back without this COVID scenario.
Yeah, that's amazing, Manish. Just wanted to recap, and that's a lot of optimism. I could see in that how COVID can be a huge opportunity, while that could be a short-term issue, right? Oh, just for the benefit of maybe people who have joined later, just to state some of the benefits the fashion industry globally will get is one, we will all accelerate digital by now default, not by design. And if those who are lagging behind are going to catch up by sheer need of the hour. Supply chains, we have been talking about saying that it has to be nimble, responsive, etc. I think a lot of companies will catch up and become the Zaras of the world again from a need perspective. That's interesting stuff happening. And very different perspective, saying that people look at only bad cost and good cost. this bad revenue, good revenue is, I would maybe generalize that and say there is going to be a good amount of cleanup. And, I heard about this saying many a times, when I was in supply chain, I used to hear, right, when the water level goes down, you see the stones, right? And a lot of cleanup is going to happen across the organization. And your point on sustainability and country of origin importance, and if I have to maybe bundle that together, saying that this is an opportunity for brands to increase their trust, right? And that's coming up clearly. And very interesting perspective you had on, it's not about basics, right? And people think that, basics will start selling, etc. They will. But the point is when they come to the store or shop wherever they want, there is going to be a redefinition of what is essential, right? And I'm sure we will all go through what that means, right? And they may be buying. You have something to say, Manish?
So I think as an, see, I had a interesting, I was reading an interesting article by the global CEOs, by one of the global CEOs of a denim brand, and he said that a fashion article, once they reopened in China, and they were expecting that that staples would move, they saw that for ladies, a fashion article started moving much faster. So I think as an, see, we would probably be great astrologers if we could predict in terms of what's going to happen. But very clearly, I think as in there are certain things that we are forming hypotheses right now, but the consumer is going to decide. And most probably, as in, it might be very different from what all we have been predicting. So I think somebody who's been, and I look at it myself, so somebody who's been at house for 45, 50 odd days, and that person then gets an opportunity to buy online or go to a store. I don't know, as in, it will depend a lot in terms of my state of mind at that point of time as to how do I shop and what do I shop. Again, it's going to depend in terms of whether I've got my salary in full or half or whichever way. But again, in terms of very, very clearly, I'm not going to buy something which is there in my wardrobe. So that's something which I'm very, very clear that a consumer is not going to buy something which already is there. They're going to buy something different. So you need to have that amount of freshness. You need to, as in, probably I'll not buy something which I know is not going to, as in, last for a week or 2 weeks in terms of fashion or in terms of durability, but I'm going to buy something which is different for sure.
Yeah, Manish, I think that makes a lot of, a lot of sense from objectively look at it. I think, what consumers will buy, and also you had a data point from China. It's definitely worth looking at. If people are completely rehashing their merchandise, better they wait and watch and keep, responding based on feedback from the consumer. Great. With that sum up, I'll just go through all the questions that we have received. Let me take it in the order and the votes that we have got for those questions. The first one is, you mentioned somewhere about hyperlocal will catch traction. Any specific action you're planning at hyperlocal level from store to consumer?
So, see, effectively what we have realized, and we have been working on this project for almost 3 weeks now. It came up, we do a daily management meet, and then we do it with the second level. So the second level came up with a thing very clearly that even when we open up the stores, the consumer is going to be very afraid to come to the store. So do we have a lever wherein, and as in, again, we have a relationship. So we have a lot of staff who has a relationship with the consumer in terms of knowing them by name, having their phone number. Is there a way that we can leverage that relationship? So we have the inventory in the store, we have that relationship, but as in the consumer doesn't want to come in. So how do we leverage it? And we said that, okay, can we look at a solution that this guy sends in a WhatsApp, an image or a catalog, and then we deliver. And that's where I think as in hyperlocal is going to play a very, very important role, wherein you'll have a lot of situations wherein, so one is that in terms of actually leveraging that inventory, leveraging that as in bond or trust that the consumer has. Secondly, in terms of today, a consumer wouldn't, even if he wants to, as in buy something, he wouldn't want to wait for a day or two for getting that merchandise. If you can fulfill that need in 2 hours, that's going to be the key, and that's going to make a whole lot of difference. So we've actually worked out an internal solution which we'll be rolling out as soon as we open the stores.
That's amazing. Which means that the store will go to the houses, rather than people coming to your store.
Right.
You are
See,
all
end
ready.
of the day, as in it's so how I look at it, as in we can't decide where the consumer is going to shop. We are going to give them avenues and options in terms of we are ready to serve you, and you tell us whichever way you want to be served.
Absolutely. That's putting consumer at the center perfectly. So the second question is, while digital is going to be a sought after channel, apart from all the aggregators, what's your view on cost of customer acquisition in this channel? Because even the biggest players are not profitable as we talk.
So if I look at it, uh, as in if I look at brands as in when they are doing sites of their own, as in we are looking at as in 6, 8, 11x sort of numbers. So I think as in, and when I look at it, cost of retail, when you compare it to as in offline retail, especially in terms of shopping centers, and when I'm talking of shopping centers, and probably the shopping center in the bigger cities, I think as in if you are able to over a period of time work out a model wherein you are getting something like 10, 11x sort of a revenue in terms of your spends to revenue, I think that's a pretty workable solution. And when I look at numbers, there are a lot of brands which are able to do that. Again, you are not going to become a behemoth wherein probably as in I would say that 20-25% of of your revenue starts coming in from your own website. But today's scenario, if I see as in what brands should aim at is that if e-commerce can become, let's say, and I'm saying there are brands which are already at 30%, but I'll give you my example. So if I was looking at as in that e-commerce would become 25% of our revenue in 3 years time, I'm saying that probably that needs to happen next year itself. And then probably 6 to 7% of my revenue from today's zero needs to come in from my side itself.
Oh, got it. Absolutely. I think one of the question was that do you think that acquiring customers is going to be expensive in that channel, when particularly your own website?
So I would say no. And my clear as in reason for that is that if I look at it, I have a whole lot of consumer who actually has loyalty for the brand, who shops with us, and as in if I'm able to give him as in terms of an avenue to shop with me as compared to shopping at a marketplace or some of as in a site which doesn't belong to me, for sure as in he'll be much more comfortable shopping with me. Plus, I'll have to as in build in those hygienes in terms of ensuring that the consumer journey is good, the delivery service is good. Plus, if I'm able to add in as in areas like, so let's say if I have a loyalty program, if the same loyalty program works across my online channel also, those areas are also going to help me in terms of creating that ecosystem. So I don't think that as in given the current scenario and as in the recent studies that we have seen. So as in 5 years down the line or even 3 years down the line, people used to think that consumer acquisition cost is going to be a lot. I think as in over a period of time, what we have realized is that anyway you are spending so much of money on digital. So if I look at it, an average Facebook post or an Instagram post, sorry, if that I do, I get an average 4,500, 5,000 likes. If I'm able to convert a small fraction, even a 1% of that likes into revenue, as in my cost of as an acquisition or my cost of consumer marketing isn't that much. So that's how I look at it.
No, absolutely. I think the challenge is therefore to convert, well said, Manish. So the next question is, what would be your advice for small and medium brands and retailers?
Sorry.
The question is, what is your advice for small and medium-sized brands and retailers at this point of time?
So I think most important thing that, as in, I think which will work across the board is that anybody should look at the next 3 to 4 months in terms of just sustenance. You should look at your cash flows. You should conserve money. Don't get extravagant in terms of saying, okay, this is an opportunity which I can catch on. So conserve money, conserve your cash for the next 3-4 months. I think the other important thing is that you need to look at as in from a longer term perspective is in terms of look at variability, look at as an horizon in terms of that you are playing, look at trying and be versatile in terms of your offering, and at the same time, as in try and see if you can make as much of your cost variable as possible. So it might, as in we have had a scenario wherein we had a classical theory that you have a cost which is fixed, and then as you keep growing, that's going to become smaller as a percentage of your revenue. I'm saying that in today's scenario, it's better to, even if it is higher, try and make as much cost variable as possible, because that's going to help you over a period to tide over the next 12 to 15, 18 months.
Absolutely. I think this variable thought process is, really interesting, so that, there is skin in the game for the people in the ecosystem. Next question is, during these times, fear is, how do you minimize fear with people?
So I think I'll probably look at it in two aspects. So I think first of all, most importantly, to overcome fear, you need to develop trust. So because I think the only way that you can overcome fear is by actually communicating in terms of what you are doing to overcome those fears. And but again, for that communication to be effective, it is important to build trust. Otherwise, as in you'll keep on saying and harping on things, but if the receptor doesn't have trust on you, you'll never be able to overcome that. So, as in develop trust, communicate, and then as the third level, as in demonstrate it in your actions. So I think those three things as in are actually going to help you in terms of overcoming that fear.
No, well said, Manish. I think fear and trust are inversely proportional. Now,
Yeah.
does that mean brands which are established, right, and which have trust are going to win this time, but they are expensive? How do you manage that?
So I would say that again, you might have, as in people might have trust on you, but that's as in you will need to as in reestablish it or reinforce it. You can't just rely on saying that, okay, I'm a big brand, so we open tomorrow and consumers are gonna just come into my store and start shopping. You'll have to as in reinforce that trust and believe in terms of saying that uh, these are the steps that I'm taking to ensure that you are safe. So whether it is in terms of communicating to them in terms of how you are sanitizing your stores, what your measures you are taking with your staff, what measures are you taking with your merchandise, uh, again, what measures are you taking from a consumer's perspective. So it's communication again as in is going to become very, very important. Trust as in might have been there, but you might as in develop a deficit if you don't communicate. So that communication is going to play a very, very important role. And again, when you're communicating, I think somewhere it is important during this time that when you are communicating during COVID and during these hard times, probably in terms of your tone of your messaging doesn't need to be commercial. So sometimes as in you need to get over those phases wherein you say that everything that I'll do needs to have a ROI. Today as in you can send a simple message to a consumer saying that how do you feel and we are with you, and it doesn't need to be have a call for action in terms of saying that okay, you need to buy something, that is why I'm wishing you. So I think those are things as in which will play a very important role. So probably as in if I look at it right now, even if you do something in terms of a Facebook activity, Instagram activity, or whatever, don't get commerce into it. Sometimes as in it's important to just as in reinforce that trust, and then when the time comes to actually encash it, leave it for that time.
Well said, Manish. I think, we've also been hearing that these are the times to have a lot of empathy with the consumer,
Right.
understand exactly which stage they are in and align everything accordingly, right? So it
Right.
makes a lot of sense. And the next question is, you talked about, these are the times to crunch the supply chain. Can you share anything specific that you are doing to transform long supply chain?
So I think as in one major initiative that we are taking is that we have this as a typical cycle wherein we book our orders once in a season in a physical location and get in almost 800 or 900 or 1000 partners at one single location across 5 days and book those orders. and we book it for the whole season in terms of a 6 month cycle. And I think the biggest problem starts there, because effectively you're locking in your fortune for 6 months within those 5 days. And the issue has been that, as in, why can't I plan for 3 months or 2 months? Is that because how do you get such a big uh, as in terms of gathering again, the cost is going to be high, so it's not possible, and people are not going to come. So what we are doing is that we are looking at, for our summer 21, actually doing digital online booking for our summer 21 line. And once, as in, we are successful, what we see is that we don't need to book for 6 months. We can break it up into 2 to 3 months cycle, and then that will help us in terms of actually working on the whole supply chain bit. So when you are looking at a comparatively smaller season, you are again looking at in terms of suppliers. So rather than having huge peaks in terms of your intakes, you are basically, as in, moderating the intakes, almost breaking them into equal monthly installments, so to say. And that gives you huge leeway in terms of your capacities, in terms of how you plan. And we are also doing a lot of work in terms of harmonizing fabric bases, in terms of the way we work with factories, in terms of probably lowering down the number of vendors that we work with. But I think the biggest change is going to be in terms of the way we book and reach reach the intermediary or the partners that we work with.
Yeah, Manish, what we see is that you're starting your, reducing the cycle from the demand side itself, from
Right.
all the retailers. Now, people say, right, you book first, you get shelf space. How are you going to address that, if these booking schedules are not aligned with other brands, or somebody wants to be nimble, somebody has the power of the brand? For how do you see that panning out?
So how I look at it, Ganesh, today's scenario, effectively, as in, gone are the days wherein we, as in, especially our business, used to run in a typical FMCG sort of a scenario, wherein you said that the more shelf space that you will get, the more you will sell. So, and I've seen, as in, I've grown in terms of those particular environments wherein we used to run a lot of our business, fashion businesses, like those FMCG businesses. I think those days are gone. Today, you can generate the same amount of revenue at half the space, and the retailer or the intermediary today is also clever enough to realize that it's better that I have better inventory turns, even if it means a lower margin with a particular brand, as compared to, as in, giving higher spaces and then not realizing the same amount of money. So I think people are getting smart enough. And end of the day, how you have to look at it from a brand's and a business perspective is that how quickly are you able to churn your capital. I think that's going to be the most important thing. That's what, as in, every single brand owner, or as in stakeholder or shareholder, is going to look at. That's something even your intermediary is going to look at. That's also something even the consumer looks at, that in terms of how quickly can I get something new on the same shelf. So I think it works well. I'm not afraid, probably, as in, people might get bigger spaces, but end of the day, my productivity, my gym rough, my numbers in terms of how I'm able to rotate my capital would be much better. And that's what I would aim at.
Oh, that's great, Manish. Therefore, what you're saying is the true demand is going to be the decider. If you can turn
Yes.
around your inventory, consumer is taking goods off the shelf, you don't need to worry about anything else.
Right.
Again, putting consumer at the center of everything you do comes very true. Going to the next question, this is on sustainability. You also talked about that. Brands often find communicating sustainability and adoption in design effectively enough to their end consumers. What are your recommendations? There is a dichotomy. Should I not? Right now.
So I think the biggest problem for brands for a long period of time, and we started with this with things like organic cotton and all, was that we had a story. We were never clear as in if it is going to be a big story in the consumer's mind. And then, as in, whenever we looked at it, we had to charge a premium for these stories, because as in these as in sustainable practices were coming at a price as compared to normal practices. So the issue was that, as in, And end of the day, you are not able to show any visible differentiation to the consumer to charge, as in to justify that premium. So brands were very, very afraid, as in that, as in even if I do this and I communicate and put my marketing money behind this, I'll not be able to, as in show that differentiation to the consumer, and that whole story is going to die down. But I think somewhere, if I look at the last 3 to 4 years, the consumer is changing. They are realizing that, uh, as in, it's not important that you see a surface differentiation or a visual differentiation on a garment, uh, to, as in, justify a price, or to say that, as in, this is sustainable and this is not sustainable. It's that whole story that runs behind it, in terms of saying how this was sourced, how this was manufactured, how this is going to be disposed of post my use. So I think consumers have become much more uh, enlightened, or as in terms of open to actually knowing how the whole journey goes, rather than just saying that I will only pay for the perceived value of this product in terms of saying how this looks on me. I think that's one big change that has happened, and that is the reason wherein today for brands it's actually becoming easier in terms of actually communicating those sustainability stories.
Absolutely. I think, we are seeing this situation where we are going through a phase where ethics will be greater than aesthetics at some point of time, at least equal to.
Yeah, so I think you got it right, as in 100% right when you said at least equal to. I surely believe that at some point it's going to far surpass, but I think we are soon reaching a stage wherein it will become equal.
Great. So let me go to the next question where, yeah, 1 second. Based on your experiences in 2008, what's your view on, I think you talked about core products. Yeah, let's skip that. What would be your single advice to any fashion or retail professional during these tough times? As an individual, we are talking about people now.
Sure. I would say, as in anybody, as in a professional in our industry today, actually, as in is getting this time wherein probably an hour during the day, they just need to, as in, shut themselves off from all media, all WhatsApps, in terms of possible scenarios. There are some, I think, 500 reports through, right from McKinsey to Deloitte to everybody, which are floating around. And they just need to say, in terms of saying, this is my business, this is my consumer, and then what different can I do in terms of what I've been doing till now. I think that's the most important thing. This is a time wherein, as in, basic ideas, simple ideas, which might have, as in, sounded idiotic even 3 months down the line, might become great ideas or big ideas for the future.
I'm sure it's going to be helpful for all those who are listening, Manish. The next question is, do you see any fundamental shift in fashion need states from a consumer perspective post-COVID?
So I think, as in, if I look at it, probably for the next 18 months, we are going to actually become season agnostic. So, and when I say season agnostic, I am saying in terms of the fashionability side of product. So it's only going to be, as in, when you need a jacket, you actually need a jacket. But otherwise, in terms of this whole concept of spring, summer, and autumn, winter, especially in a country like ours, is just going to vanish, because brands are going to carry over inventory. Consumer is not going to be, as in, so much bothered in terms of saying that where does it actually belong to, because a red is a red. It is going to be a red in summer, it is going to be a red in winter, and I can sell the same t-shirt of spring, summer, and autumn, winter also, because till October or November, even in north. So I think next 18 months, I think that whole, as in, uh, divide that we had built into of seasons, especially for a country like ours, is just going to go off. It's going to be much more need based in terms of saying, okay, I need a t-shirt. I need a t-shirt today. It might be October, it might be November. I need a shirt today. I need a jacket today. And that whole spring, summer, autumn, winter color of the season is not going to play a very important role for the next 12 to 18 months.
We were talking to Lalit Agarwal this morning, and he was talking about less is more. I think looks like we are getting into season less, right? And I think a lot of stuff is happening. I think it's interesting, and it's also good. It makes people to relook at their architecture of merchandise. Definitely, we'll see how that pans out. There are other questions here. Maybe I'll pick two out of what is remaining. How you talked about channel mix change, right? And you said these times, how are you reimagining channel mix? Anything specific you can share?
So for me, very clearly, as I said, as an online is going to become much more prominent. So that weightage is going to, so very clearly in the next 3 to 4 months, I see the consumer is going to be much more comfortable buying online than going to shops or shopping centers. So that's, and again, I think there a fundamental shift that I see also happening is that people will probably, and I hope that again comes true. That's my thought process again. Uh, uh, as in, I wish that I was an astrologer, but I think people will get much more comfortable in terms of buying full price merchandise online because they would be afraid to go to the store. So I think that's a shift that's going to happen. This proportion of online is going to increase. I think in terms of bigger shopping spaces like department stores and all for a long period of time, like your shopping centers and your cinemas, people will be afraid. So again, if you look at your stores, which is comparatively a smaller controlled environment, people will, as in first, get much more comfortable to move into a brand store and move in and shop in there because you would have that element of trust plus a comparatively confined environment with known people. So I think online is going to get big, and the second thing would be in terms of exclusive standalone stores, which would see a comparative shift in terms of consumer preference.
Got it. Therefore, the comfort hierarchy, as you're saying, could be that digital first, followed by exclusive stores, maybe the high street ones, and then
First high street, then shopping centers. So I think shopping center for a long period of time is going to be something which people will try and avoid because again, if you look at it, shopping centers were more like as in weekend getaways for a lot of families, nuclear families in India. So with the two biggest attractions in terms of movies and food gone for a long time, I think they will, as in that would be the last in terms of hierarchy wherein people will get comfortable to shop.
Got it. Great. So maybe the last question is, Pepe as a brand has been there internationally. It's around many countries, and you shared something from China some time back. But can you just share anything that which is relevant based on what you heard so far, which people can adopt?
So in Europe, what we are seeing is online is allowed in most of the countries that we are operating is, and we are seeing a huge, as in what we are talking about India, we are actually seeing that shift in Europe, and we are seeing that shift. So we have seen as in terms of Austria and Germany were certain places wherein some stores were allowed to open, but we are seeing that again, even with the stores opening up, as in people are much more comfortable to shop online. Online shopping has seen an increase of anywhere between 30 to 290% across various weeks and days that as in we had data on. So people, again, there is an interesting trend that is coming across. People are getting, especially during these times of lockdown, people are buying a lot of leisure, as in so-called what we call as athleisure in terms of joggers and t-shirts as compared to the normal denims. And the other thing is that in terms of, we are also seeing a shift in terms of uh, already within the 2 weeks of lockdown in terms of people buying a size higher as compared to what they were buying previously.
Very interesting.
One big as in change as in post lockdown as in another interesting trend that came across, and it's not for us but some of the other companies saw it in China, is that they saw a huge thrust on kids wear on online, because apparently what has happened is that during the 60, 70, 80 days of lockdown, kids have actually grown up in terms of their sizes. So again, we feel that kids wear is going to be a big opportunity once the lockdown opens up.
Amazing insights, Manish. Some of them are very, very counterintuitive. I think it's not very intuitive to talk about. One is maybe your size ratios need to be relooked at, right? I think people are sitting at home, maybe obesity. We also read some reports on obesity moving up. Of course, we need to look at regionally what's happening here. And kids is a huge opportunity. And the category of products people will buy maybe post-COVID. And of course, there are a lot of debates about the table, about the desk. And now you're talking about athleisure. All of that one needs to look at. And any closing remarks, Manish, before we end this talk?
So how I look at it, I am very, very optimistic in terms of saying that this is a temporary blip, as in probably that is going to last, as in you normally blips last for a second or a small period of time. So this is going to be longer, probably 9 to 12 months, but very clearly, as in it gives us a chance to improve our efficiencies, actually probably change the way we work, and we'll come out as a, I'm very, very sure about India as a geography, as a country, that we'll come out much more stronger and much more healthier from this and grow at much faster pace than we've been growing.
That is fantastic, Manish. It was wonderful listening to you, and thank you for sparing your time. And I'm sure the audience have got a lot of inputs which are very unique and different, and help them get prepared much better than before. Thank you very much once again.
Thanks, Anish. Thanks.
Stay safe.
Thank you for your time, Manish. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Emma. Thank you.